They sent assassins from worlds that thrived on fear. A mantled stalker, a cephalid shade, a stormworld brute. Each thought they could erase the myth of Baba Yaga. She sat in a cafe on Varnese 7, rain tapping the windows. One blade from her boot. Sweetheart, it's never the knife. It's the hand that holds it. The hunters learned that lesson the hard way. Now the Empire trembles at what they unleashed. The command chamber echoed. Metallic laughter bounced off polished walls, sharp and dismissive. Council members leaned back in their thrones, data slates forgotten. This wasn't a threat assessment. It was entertainment. They dismissed the Baba Yaga as frontier superstition. A ghost story traders told around jump point campfires. One admiral called it primitive psychological debris. Another tapped the table. We've pacified 12 systems with greater mythological baggage. This is simple pest control. Then the archivist spoke. Her voice cut through the noise like cold steel. Do not mock what you have not met. She stood at the chamber's edge, a data rod in her wrinkled hand. Cross-referencing 7 independent reports suggests a tactical anomaly. Survival rates for engagement 0%. Recommend extreme threat classification. The council exchanged smirks. A grizzled general waved a dismissive hand. We'll send 3. From cultures that understand fear. Let them handle this. Local problem, they chose specialists. A mantled stalker from Xylos, where hunters perfect silent movement through gravitational anomalies. A cephalid shade from the psychic mists of Caliban, trained in mental intrusion and neural overload. A stormworld brute from Tartarus, where combat is biological necessity against constant atmospheric violence. Each represented a distinct elimination philosophy. The stalker, surgical precision and environmental mastery. The shade, psychological domination and unseen attack. The brute, overwhelming physical force and terror tactics. The council saw 3 perfect instruments. They never considered they were sending 3 test subjects. Their arrogance stemmed from centuries of colonial success. Humanity remained categorized as a Tier 3 species, industrious but predictable, emotional but fragile. The Empire's files listed human weaknesses, sentimentality, individual hero complexes, physical limitations. They assumed Baba Yaga would follow established patterns. This decision revealed their fundamental flaw. They measured threat by volume of firepower, not quality of mind. They understood conquest but not cunning. They could map star systems but not the human capacity for controlled violence. The archivist watched them authorize the mission. She didn't speak again. Her warning hung in the air, ignored like ancient text. She saw the pattern they missed. Every civilization that encountered the Baba Yaga myth eventually learned it wasn't myth at all. The order went out through encrypted channels. 3 assassins received coordinates, a target description, and a simple directive. Eliminate with extreme prejudice. No further intelligence. No contingency protocols. The council truly believed they were swatting an insect. They were planting seeds. Each assassin carried imperial arrogance like a scent. Each moved with absolute confidence in their methods. They represented the Empire's unwavering belief in its own superiority. Dusk fell on Varnese 7. The planet's twin moons cast long shadows across the spaceport. Neon signs flickered to life along the muddy streets. Somewhere in the rain-slicked darkness, 3 predators began their hunt. They moved with purpose, unaware they were walking into a lesson they wouldn't survive. Rainwater traced slow lines down the cafe window. Neon lights from the street outside bled through the glass, painting the interior in watery reds and blues. She sat alone at a corner table, steam rising from a simple cup of black coffee. Her hands rested on the worn surface, utterly still. She looked like any other patron waiting out the storm. They never considered she might be waiting for them. The mantled stalker struck first. It moved through the crowded space with perfect silence, bending light and shadow around its form. Patrons continued their conversations, completely unaware of the predator sliding between tables. Its approach was textbook precision, environmental mastery, perfect timing, 0 emotional signature. It reached her table. 2 elongated fingers extended toward her carotid artery. The strike would cause instant neural shutdown. No noise, no mess, except her coffee spoon was already moving. Not toward the stalker, toward the floor. The metal implement tapped twice against the tile. A signal, an answer. Below them, the cephalid shade initiated psychic intrusion. It had positioned itself in the basement, its consciousness extending through the building's structure like tendrils of mist. It sought to flood her mind with primal terror, to short-circuit her nervous system before she could react. It poured centuries of perfected psychic violence into the woman at the table. It hit a wall. Not a barrier, a mirror. Her mind reflected its own attack back at it, amplified, refined. The shade experienced its own signature technique turned into a perfect feedback loop. It collapsed in the darkness below, its neural pathways burning out from the inside. The stalker above never saw the knife. One moment its fingers were centimeters from her neck. The next, a simple kitchen blade was buried to the hilt in its thoracic cavity, angled precisely between two alien ribs. She had drawn it from her boot without shifting her posture. Her free hand never left the table. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice calm, almost conversational. "It's never the knife. It's the hand that holds it." She twisted the blade. The stalker fell without a sound. The storm world brute chose that moment to break through the front window. 300 kilos of armored muscle and fury. Its entrance was pure spectacle. Shattering glass, roaring challenge designed to trigger panic. It expected to find a room full of screaming civilians and one terrified target. It found silence. Patrons were already under tables, not screaming, but watching with a strange, resigned calm. And the woman was standing now, knife clean, stance relaxed. The brute charged, its armored fist capable of pulverizing plasteel. She didn't retreat. She stepped inside its reach. The knife flickered once. Not a killing blow. A precise cut across its primary visual sensor cluster. The beast roared, blinded, swinging wildly. She moved like water around its attacks, never striking to kill, only to guide. She herded it toward the broken window. With a final, almost gentle push, she sent the disoriented creature stumbling back through the shattered frame. It fell into the rainy street, thrashing. She didn't watch it go. She simply turned, walked back to her table, and finished her coffee. The whole engagement took 60 seconds. In a sterile command center light years away, 3 status icons switched from active to terminated. No distress calls, no final sensor data, just 3 silent failures. The first data point was recorded. The experiment had begun. Command screens glowed with termination reports. 3 elite operators, 60 seconds of combat, no survivors. The council didn't reconsider. They doubled down. 12 new assassins received elimination orders within the hour. Each hunter came from cultures that weaponized fear. A venom dancer from Silas Prime, whose touch induced synaptic collapse. A resonance killer from Harmonic 5, capable of shattering matter with controlled frequency emissions. A shadow weaver from the lightless depths of Nox, able to phase through solid objects. The selection represented escalating tactical diversity, biological, acoustic, dimensional threats. The council believed in overwhelming force. Their doctrine stated any problem could be solved with sufficient application of violence. They viewed the Baba Yaga situation as a math equation. Previous force insufficient, therefore increase variables until solution emerges. They never considered they were adding data points to her research. Their pride couldn't accept the reality. One human woman requiring 12 specialist assassins? The logistics alone weakened other sectors. Patrol ships diverted from border surveillance. Intelligence assets pulled from critical monitoring stations. The Imperial machine began redirecting resources to what should have been a minor cleanup operation. Each assassin represented another layer of Imperial capability. The Council wasn't just sending killers, they were displaying their military catalog. Chameleon-skinned hunters who blended with urban environments. Sonic specialists who could disrupt neural function across city blocks. Thermal ghosts who left no energy signature. They were throwing their most exotic tools at what they still called a pest control problem. The archivist watched the deployment orders flash across her screen. She didn't speak during the council session. She simply recorded each assignment, each specialist designation, each estimated time of engagement. Her fingers moved calmly across the input console. She was building a database they would later wish they'd consulted. Back on Varnese 7, the woman they hunted bought a new knife. Simple carbon steel, balance grip, 8-inch blade. She tested its edge against her thumb, then paid with Imperial credits from a fallen stalker's pouch. The weapon cost less than the coffee she'd spilled during the previous engagement. She knew they were coming. The pattern was established now. Failure begets escalation. They would send more. They would send different. They would keep feeding their best into her evaluation process. She walked through the rainy streets, new knife in her coat pocket, mentally cataloging the likely next wave. The Empire saw themselves as hunters executing a troublesome target. They never considered they were specimens being examined. Each new attacker provided another data point on Imperial capabilities, response times, tactical doctrines. The woman wasn't defending herself. She was conducting field research with extreme prejudice. 12 hunters converged on Varnese 7 from different vectors. Some came by commercial transport. Others used military dropships. A few employed personal stealth craft. Their approaches reflected their specialties, some obvious and intimidating, others completely undetectable to standard scans. The Council monitored the operation from light years away. They expected confirmation flashes, 12 terminations, mission complete. They didn't understand they were sending 12 new lessons, 12 more entries in a growing tactical profile, 12 opportunities for the myth to solidify into operational reality. Baba Yaga returned to her rented room. She placed the new knife on the table beside 3 others. Each blade represented a different Imperial approach. Each would be tested against corresponding specialists. She hummed an old tune as she cleaned her weapons. The Empire was providing excellent training material. She kept notes. Not on data slates or recording devices, mental annotations filed away during combat intervals. Each engagement provided specific metrics: reaction times, preferred attack angles, environmental utilization. She wasn't fighting for survival. She was conducting field research with live subjects. The Venom Dancer from Silas Prime taught her about neurotoxin delivery systems. She noted the exact millisecond delay between fang extension and venom ejection. The Resonance Killer demonstrated harmonic vulnerability points in various materials. She cataloged which frequencies caused structural fatigue in Imperial armor plating. The Shadow Weaver revealed limitations of phase-shifting technology, specifically how it disrupted local gravity fields. She hummed while working. An old folk tune from Earth's pre-spaceflight era, the melody predated their entire civilization by centuries. The sound seemed to unnerve the more psychically sensitive attackers. She made note of that too. Each assassin became a data point. Their equipment, their tactics, their psychological conditioning. She treated violence like a controlled experiment. Variables introduced, reactions observed, conclusions drawn. The Empire saw random defensive actions. They witnessed what appeared to be luck or instinct or supernatural intervention. They missed the systematic approach. How she always positioned herself near specific materials when facing energy weapons. How she deliberately allowed certain attacks to nearly connect, just to measure response times. How she left minor wounds untreated to test alien tracking methods based on blood chemistry. Her knife work was particularly instructive. She used the blade not just as weapon but as measuring tool. The resistance of different alien anatomies to various edge angles. The effectiveness of Imperial body armor against thrust versus slash. How different species reacted to seeing their own internal structures. The Empire's arrogance blinded them to the pattern. They kept sending specialists, each more exotic than the last, never realizing they were providing exactly what she needed. A comprehensive analysis of Imperial military capabilities from the ground up. Every failed assassination attempt filled another gap in her understanding. She didn't just learn how to kill them, she learned how they thought. Their tactical doctrines revealed through action. Their command structures evident in response times and equipment choices. Their cultural biases showed in attack patterns and psychological warfare attempts. The resolution came during the 12th engagement. A thermal ghost from Nox attempted ambush in a fuel processing facility. She let it believe it had perfect camouflage. Then she used its own heat signature to overload its cooling systems. As it collapsed into thermal runaway, she spoke calmly into the rising temperature. The knife was not the weapon. It was the invitation. She'd never been trying to kill them with the blade. She'd been inviting them to demonstrate their capabilities against a controlled variable. Patterns began emerging across what command perceived as disconnected incidents. Response team deployment times consistently fell within predictable windows. Backup protocols always followed specific escalation patterns. Equipment failure rates showed consistent manufacturing flaws across multiple Imperial suppliers. She now understood their logistics, their communications, their infrastructure weaknesses. The knife had never been the threat. It was the bait that drew out everything she needed to know about how the Empire actually functioned under pressure. Each dead assassin had provided another piece of the puzzle. The picture was nearly complete. The hunters came expecting terror. They'd trained against simulated human responses: adrenaline spikes, panic reactions, fight-or-flight impulses. Their psychological profiles predicted certain behaviors: screaming, begging, desperate attempts to negotiate. They arrived as predators entering a familiar hunting cycle. They found something else entirely: calm assessment, clinical observation, a strange, detached curiosity that unsettled them more than any display of fear. Their psychological frameworks had no category for what they encountered. She used their own methods against them. A resonance killer attempted sonic disorientation, emitting frequencies designed to trigger primal dread. She matched the frequencies with her humming, turning the attack into harmonic resonance that shattered its emitter array. "Bit off key there, darling," she remarked, not even raising her voice. The dark humor became a weapon. During an engagement that destroyed a bakery display case, she told the chameleon-skinned hunter, "You owe me a new slice of pie." The comment threw off its attack rhythm. It hesitated, processing the absurdity. That half-second cost it everything. She turned domestic complaints into combat taunts, ordinary grievances into psychological disruptions. Her calmness rewrote the rules of engagement. Hunters accustomed to feeding on fear found themselves starving. Their intimidation tactics produced no reaction. Their threats elicited only analytical interest. She treated their most terrifying abilities as data points to be cataloged, not threats to be feared. Predators became uncertain in their own hunting grounds. The Shadow Weaver phased through a wall expecting to find a target preparing defenses or fleeing. Instead, it found her waiting with a container of liquid nitrogen, having calculated exactly where it would materialize. "Temperature test," she explained as its phase shift field crystallized. She controlled the emotional tempo of every encounter, setting rhythms that disrupted their combat conditioning. Their confidence eroded with each failed expectation. A venom dancer expected her to avoid its poisoned strikes. Instead, she deliberately allowed a near miss, collecting toxin samples on a blade tip for later analysis. "Fine craftsmanship," she noted, examining the residue. "Imperial Biolab still can't match natural synthesis." The comment revealed she knew more about their technology than they did. The psychological warfare extended beyond individual engagements. She began leaving messages, not threats, observations. After disabling a thermal ghost, she placed its own cooling unit beside its immobilized form with a note: "Efficiency reduced 12% in humid environments. Recommend membrane upgrade." The insult was professional, specific, and devastating. Hunters arrived as confident specialists. They left as failed experiments. Their psychological profiles collapsed under the weight of her calm assessment. They weren't just being defeated physically, they were being invalidated professionally. Their training, their technology, their very understanding of combat psychology proved inadequate. In the silence between termination reports, the archivist watched the pattern form. Not just tactical data, psychological profiles shifting, confidence metrics dropping across all operator categories. The woman wasn't just killing Imperial assets, she was dismantling Imperial certainty. The hunters became hunted in their own minds long before the blade found them. The command center fell silent between termination alerts. No new reports flashed across the main display. Only the quiet hum of cooling systems and the faint click of the archivist's data rod against her console. She worked alone in the dim light, her screen showing patterns the council refused to see. She'd compiled every engagement, not just the outcomes. The methodologies, the response times, the weapon effectiveness metrics. The data formed a coherent picture they'd mistaken for disconnected failures. Her fingers hovered over the alert button. She knew what this was. Not elimination, performance evaluation. The council finally noticed her stillness. "Archivist, your assessment." The demand came from the senior admiral, his voice tight with controlled frustration. She didn't look up from her screen. "No," she said quietly. "She is the door through which the others will walk." The words hung in the air, stark and simple. They were measuring humanity against their own fears. Each assassin sent became another calibration point. The stalker tested infiltration capabilities. The shade measured psychic defense thresholds. The brute established physical force parameters. They weren't hunting a myth. They were facing systematic assay. The Admiral leaned forward, his polished boots reflecting the dim light. Explain. The archivist finally looked up, her eyes old in a way that had nothing to do with chronology. We sent our best. She sent back results. Not body counts, data. She turned her screen toward them. Every engagement followed the same pattern. Initial contact, a technique demonstration, countermeasure application, termination, always with enough time left for analysis. She pointed to the resonance killer's file. She let it demonstrate full frequency range before using its own emissions to disable it. The thermal ghost allowed complete phase cycle before introducing thermal shock. Each example landed like a physical blow. They'd seen combat reports. She saw laboratory results. The Council faced their own reflection in failed operations. Their arrogance, their tactical doctrines, their technological superiority, all being measured and catalogued by a single woman with a knife. The Admiral's hand tightened on his chair arm. She's testing us. The archivist nodded once. And we keep providing excellent subject material. The warning landed with chilling clarity, but too late. 27 elite operators gone. Billions of credits in specialized equipment lost. Strategic assets diverted from critical sectors. All feeding a evaluation process they'd mistaken for a combat operation. They realized the truth then. They weren't the hunters. They were the specimens. Each new attack provided more data on Imperial capabilities than a decade of espionage could gather. She wasn't defending against their assault. She was conducting quality control on their military infrastructure. The Admiral stood slowly, his uniform suddenly seeming less like authority and more like a target designation. Recall all operations. Full strategic reassessment. The archivist watched him, her expression unchanged. The test parameters have already shifted. She's moving to phase 2. She turned back to her screen where new patterns were forming. The knife was never the weapon. It was the measuring tool. In a rented room on Varniz 7, Baba Yaga cleaned her blades. 27 encounters, 27 datasets. She knew their response times now, their communication protocols, their equipment limitations. The Empire had provided everything she needed to understand how to break them. The evaluation was complete. The real work could begin. Rain slicked the platform under the dim station lights. An old man stood waiting, his posture straight but relaxed. No luggage, no destination ticket. His hands rested at his sides, fingers calloused in specific patterns. Military training showed in the way he balanced his weight, the precision of his stillness. Human but not ordinary. She approached without hurry. Her boots made no sound on the wet concrete. They stood facing each other as the night train rumbled in the distance. No weapons drawn, no tension in the air. Just two professionals recognizing each other's caliber. Do you know why they call you Baba Yaga? His voice carried easily over the rain's patter. Not accusing, not fearful. Simply stating a question that needed answering. She didn't respond, watching him with that same clinical assessment she'd shown the assassins. They think it's about fear, he continued. A scary bedtime story to make conquest easier. Myths sell better than truth. Rain dripped from the platform awning between them. But that's not it. His eyes held no malice. Only understanding. No, he said, the word final. Because you're the test. He gestured toward the city behind them. The Empire doesn't understand humans. They see emotion as weakness, individuality as flaw. So they send knives when they should send diplomats. Each word landed with precise weight. Every assassin they sent? You weren't eliminating threats. You were conducting evaluation. Their weapons, their tactics, their response protocols. He nodded slowly. The survivors, the ones who made it back, carried more valuable data than any spy could gather. She finally spoke, her voice calm. They all died. The old man smiled faintly. The ones who made it back to orbit. The ones who transmitted final sensor data. The ones whose black boxes you left intact. He took a step closer. You think we didn't notice the pattern? Specific systems left functional? Particular data streams preserved? Her role crystallized in that moment. Not myth, not weapon. Living calibration tool. The Empire kept sending their best, and she kept testing their limits. Measuring response times. Assessing technological capabilities. Evaluating tactical doctrines. Each engagement provided another quality control check on Imperial military infrastructure. The old man reached into his coat. Not for a weapon, for a simple data chip. He held it between them. They're pulling assets from 12 sectors. Their coordination is failing. You've shown them their weaknesses better than any internal audit could. He placed the chip on a wet railing. The experiment enters its final phase. They're sending everything now. Their pride can't accept the results. He turned to leave, then paused. They think they're hunting a legend. They're actually facing reality testing. The train arrived with a sigh of hydraulics. Doors slid open. The old man stepped aboard without looking back. The chip remained on the railing, glistening with rain. She picked it up, turning it over in her fingers. It contained no orders, no secrets, just confirmation. She stood alone on the platform as the train pulled away. The rain fell harder now, washing the station clean. Her breath misted in the cool air. 37 engagements, 37 datasets. The Empire had provided everything she needed to understand their capabilities, their limitations, their breaking points. The chip felt cold in her hand. Not a weapon. A report card. The experiment was indeed entering its final phase. They would send their best, their final options, their last resorts, and she would be waiting with her knives and her notes ready to complete the evaluation. Lights flickered along the track as the train disappeared into the darkness. Somewhere in the Imperial command structure, they were preparing their ultimate response. They believed they were mounting a final offensive. They were actually coming for their final examination. Rain slicked the platform under the dim station lights. An old man stood waiting, his posture straight but relaxed. No luggage, no destination ticket. His hands rested at his sides, fingers calloused in specific patterns. Military training showed in the way he balanced his weight, the precision of his stillness. Human but not ordinary. She approached without hurry. Her boots made no sound on the wet concrete. They stood facing each other as the night train rumbled in the distance. No weapons drawn, no tension in the air. Just two professionals recognizing each other's caliber. Do you know why they call you Baba Yaga? His voice carried easily over the rain's patter. Not accusing, not fearful, simply stating a question that needed answering. She didn't respond, watching him with that same clinical assessment she'd shown the assassins. They think it's about fear, he continued. A scary bedtime story to make conquest easier. Myths sell better than truth. Rain dripped from the platform awning between them. But that's not it. His eyes held no malice. Only understanding. No, he said, the word final. Because you're the test. He gestured toward the city behind them. The Empire doesn't understand humans. They see emotion as weakness, individuality as flaw. So they send knives when they should send diplomats. Each word landed with precise weight. Every assassin they sent? You weren't eliminating threats. You were conducting evaluation. Their weapons, their tactics, their response protocols. He nodded slowly. The survivors, the ones who made it back, carried more valuable data than any spy could gather. She finally spoke, her voice calm. They all died. The old man smiled faintly. The ones who made it back to orbit. The ones who transmitted final sensor data. The ones whose black boxes you left intact. He took a step closer. You think we didn't notice the pattern? Specific systems left functional? Particular data streams preserved? Her role crystallized in that moment. Not myth, not weapon. Living calibration tool. The Empire kept sending their best and she kept testing their limits. Measuring response times. Assessing technological capabilities. Evaluating tactical doctrines. Each engagement provided another quality control check on Imperial military infrastructure. The old man reached into his coat. Not for a weapon, for a simple data chip. He held it between them. They're pulling assets from 12 sectors. Their coordination is failing. You've shown them their weaknesses better than any internal audit could. He placed the chip on a wet railing. The experiment enters its final phase. They're sending everything now. Their pride can't accept the results. He turned to leave, then paused. They think they're hunting a legend. They're actually facing reality testing. The train arrived with a sigh of hydraulics. Doors slid open. The old man stepped aboard without looking back. The chip remained on the railing, glistening with rain. She picked it up, turning it over in her fingers. It contained no orders, no secrets, just confirmation. She stood alone on the platform as the train pulled away. The rain fell harder now, washing the station clean. Her breath misted in the cool air. 37 engagements, 37 datasets. The Empire had provided everything she needed to understand their capabilities, their limitations, their breaking points. The chip felt cold in her hand. Not a weapon, a report card. The experiment was indeed entering its final phase. They would send their best, their final options, their last resorts, and she would be waiting with her knives and her notes ready to complete the evaluation. Lights flickered along the track as the train disappeared into the darkness. Somewhere in the Imperial command structure, they were preparing their ultimate response. They believed they were mounting a final offensive. They were actually coming for their final examination. The blade turned in mid-swing. Its purpose shifted from cutting to signaling. What began as personal defense became coordinated communication. Each parry, each thrust, each deflection now carried layered meaning beyond the immediate fight. She fought a sonic specialist in a communications array facility. As their blades met, the impact created specific vibrational patterns through the metal structures. These vibrations traveled along support beams into underground cabling. Weighting receivers detected the precise frequencies. The pattern indicated target priority and response timing. The knife was never the weapon, she murmured as she disarmed the specialist. It was the beacon. The realization dawned too late for Imperial Command. Each engagement transmitted critical data through multiple channels: acoustic, thermal, energy signature fluctuations. Everything they'd assumed was combat improvisation actually followed precise protocols. Human colonies along the border received the calibrated response patterns. Ships hiding in asteroid fields synchronized their clocks to her engagement rhythms. The myth of Baba Yaga migrated from fear story to operational plan. She became a living coordinate system, her movements providing exact timing and location data across light years. Her actions created a system-wide stress test. When she engaged a target in a power distribution hub, the specific way she disabled security systems revealed Imperial backup power activation sequences. That data immediately went to rebel engineers who used it to plan infrastructure attacks. When she fought in a transport nexus, her movement patterns through the facility mapped Imperial patrol rotations and response times. The Empire's coordination began cracking under the strain. Their communication network showed strange interference patterns exactly coinciding with her engagements. Supply lines experienced mysterious delays at critical moments. Reinforcement fleets arrived just seconds too late to intercept rebel movements. Each small disruption traced back to data collected during what Command still called assassination attempts. They failed to recognize the pattern because they viewed each incident as isolated. A knife fight in a market district, a confrontation in a maintenance tunnel, an ambush in a docking bay. They saw random defensive actions when actually they were watching coordinated signal transmission. Every blocked strike carried information. Every defensive posture indicated timing. Every movement through environments mapped structural weaknesses. Single combat became system-wide warfare conducted through blade work. She would deliberately position herself near specific types of machinery during fights. The resonance of combat would travel through metal and crystal, carrying encoded data to listening posts. Imperial sensors detected the vibrations but classified them as combat byproducts rather than information transmission. The resolution came during an engagement with an Imperial Special Operations team. She fought them through a data processing center, her blade work creating specific patterns of damage to server arrays. Each cut, each impact, each strategic positioning caused cascading effects through the Imperial network. Backup systems activated according to predictable patterns. Security protocols responded in documented sequences. Hidden forces monitored every reaction. Rebel ships waiting at jump points received real-time updates on Imperial defensive readiness. Supply depot locations revealed themselves through automated response patterns. The Empire's own coordination mechanisms became the channels through which their weaknesses were broadcast. As the last operative fell, she stood amid humming servers and flickering displays. The knife in her hand felt lighter now, its true purpose fulfilled. It had never been about killing. It had been about communication, about calibration, about providing the precise data needed to challenge an empire. The stress test was complete. Every Imperial response had been measured, every reaction time recorded, every vulnerability cataloged. The hidden forces had their coordinates. their timing, their battle plans. The Empire had focused on one woman with a knife, while the real threat assembled in the darkness around them. Command screens lit up across the Imperial network. Not with victory reports, with failure patterns. Fleet movements showed perfect counter-coordination. Supplies arrived exactly where rebels needed them. Reinforcements reached battlefields seconds too late. The pattern was too precise for chance. They weren't dealing with myth anymore. They faced traced weakness. Every vulnerability they'd ever had, every logistical delay, every communication gap, every response time limitation was being used against them with surgical precision. Their own coordination mechanisms worked against them now. Standard protocols became predictable patterns rebels anticipated and exploited. The archivist stood before the command council, her data rod pointing at the main display. Look at the timing. 7 minutes after engagement on Varniz 7, their fleet moves here. She tapped another location. 12 minutes after Cathedral incident, supply lines reroute through this sector. Each example showed the same pattern. Her actions provided timing signals for coordinated strikes across the Empire. They finally saw the outline of their own destruction. The woman they'd hunted wasn't a target. She was a system analyst conducting live evaluation. Every assassin sent, every team deployed, every specialist employed, all had provided data points. She'd turned their military apparatus into a teaching tool about its own weaknesses. The hunter had become the examiner. Their arrogance had blinded them to the truth. They'd focused on eliminating what they saw as a primitive threat, while she mapped their entire operational structure. Now that map was being used to dismantle them piece by piece. Fleet admirals watched their screens with growing dread. Patrol ships disappeared from sensors not to combat, but to perfectly timed ambushes. Communication networks experienced interference exactly when critical orders needed transmission. Supply depots exploded minutes before reinforcements arrived to resupply. The pattern revealed structural flaws they'd ignored for centuries. Their dependence on centralized command, their predictable response protocols, their equipment limitations across different environments. She hadn't just been fighting their assassins. She'd been testing Imperial capabilities under combat conditions. Myth became real threat to Imperial stability. Systems they'd controlled for generations began slipping away. Colonies they'd considered pacified rose in coordinated rebellion. Their military, once the galaxy's dominant force, found itself outmaneuvered at every turn. They realized too late that every engagement had served dual purposes. The obvious combat, the hidden data collection. When she fought their operatives, she wasn't just defending herself. She was studying Imperial technology, tactics, and response patterns. Each confrontation provided another piece of the puzzle. The Council sat in silence as the archivist laid out the evidence. Termination reports, engagement timelines, rebel movement patterns. They all aligned perfectly. She'd been feeding information to hidden forces the entire time. The knife fights, the standoffs, the confrontations, all were cover for systematic intelligence gathering. Their own pride had built the weapon that would destroy them. By sending their best against her, they'd provided exactly what she needed to understand how to break their military machine. They'd assumed they were testing her capabilities. Actually, she'd been testing theirs. The roof awaited its final lesson. Imperial Command prepared one last desperate assault. They gathered every available operative, every special forces unit, every elite soldier within range. They would throw everything at the problem they'd created. They still believed overwhelming force could solve what they didn't understand. They didn't realize the roof wasn't a battleground. It was a demonstration, the final data point in a long series of evaluations. They were coming to prove their might. She would be waiting to show them how predictable they'd become. Rain slapped the rooftop, soaking through makeshift armor plates and strained determination. The woman stood waiting, a simple kitchen knife held loosely in her right hand. Her mind already mapped the approach vectors, the wind patterns, the structural weaknesses of the rooftop beneath their feet. She wasn't preparing for a fight. She was preparing a demonstration. They came in waves, each more desperate than the last. Imperial Special Forces repelled from hovering gunships. Close-quarters specialists charged from rooftop access points. Sniper lasers painted red dots on her chest from surrounding buildings. The Empire threw everything they had left at the beacon they still didn't understand. She moved with surgical tempo. The knife became an extension of her will, cutting through armor joints, severing weapon straps, disabling comm links. Each strike precise, economical, devastating. She didn't waste motion attacking vital areas. She dismantled their capability to fight back. "Y'all ever hear the phrase?" she said as she sidestepped a powered fist strike. "Don't bring claws to a knife fight." The blade flickered out, severing hydraulic lines in the attacker's arm. The mechanical limb went limp, fluids mixing with rainwater. Dark humor became another weapon in her arsenal, each quip landing with the same precision as her physical strikes. Each cut taught fear in a way Imperial training never could. Not terror of death, but fear of inadequacy. These were elite operators watching their best techniques dismantled by a woman with kitchen utensils. Their confidence eroded with every failed attack, every parried strike, every calm assessment she offered mid-combat. Blood and steel filled the night with purpose. Not random violence, controlled, measured response. She used their numbers against them, herding attackers into each other's lines of fire, using their armor as shields against their own comrades' weapons. The rooftop became a brutal classroom where the lesson was Imperial vulnerability. The Empire kept feeding forces into the meat grinder. They saw her standing alone and believed overwhelming numbers would prevail. They failed to recognize the pattern. Every new arrival provided more data, more timing information, more proof of their predictable tactics. They were attacking the distraction while the real trap closed around them. She fought not to win the rooftop engagement, but to maintain the beacon's signal. Each clash of steel, each impact, each strategic movement transmitted critical timing data to waiting forces. The Empire focused their entire attention on this one woman, this one knife fight, while their entire military infrastructure faced coordinated assault across multiple systems. The resolution became clear as the bodies piled up. They weren't losing a battle. They were witnessing a demonstration of their own failure. Every tactical doctrine, every piece of advanced equipment, every specialized training protocol, all proved useless against calibrated response and precise application of force. Night prepared to erupt around them. Not just on this rooftop, but across the star system. Imperial Command finally recognized the pattern flashing across their screens. Every engagement on the rooftop correlated with successful rebel attacks elsewhere. She wasn't just fighting them, she was providing the timing for their defeat. The rain continued its steady fall, washing blood across the rooftop towards drainage grates. She stood amid the fallen, her knife still clean despite the carnage. The Empire had thrown their best at her and learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the distraction is the main event, and the real threat approaches from the darkness you created. Hidden ships powered up across 7 systems, not in dockyards or military bases, in asteroid fields, behind gas giant rings, buried in comet tails, human-built vessels waiting for one signal. The precise moment the Empire committed everything to a single rooftop. Human fleets held position in the silent dark. Commanders watched countdown timers synchronized to a knife fight light years away. Every engagement had provided the timing data. The cafe confrontation established response windows. The cathedral crucible mapped coordination patterns. The rooftop stand delivered final confirmation. They knew exactly when Imperial attention would be most focused, most committed, most vulnerable. The counterstrike began without warning. No declarations of war, no final demands, just coordinated attacks across every Imperial weak point simultaneously. Supply depots exploded along the border. Communication hubs went silent. Patrol ships found themselves surrounded by forces that shouldn't have been there. The galaxy's balance shifted in minutes, not years. Imperial forces discovered they were perfectly outmaneuvered. Reinforcement fleets arrived to find rebel ships already holding defensive positions. Ground troops dropped onto planets only to walk into prepared ambushes. Their own tactical protocols became traps rebel commanders anticipated and exploited. Every move they made had been predicted, every response calculated in advance. Their arrogance became their ultimate vulnerability. They'd been so focused on one woman, one knife, one mythical threat. They never saw the larger strategy unfolding around them. While they poured resources into eliminating Baba Yaga, human forces built a war machine in the shadows. While they studied combat reports, rebel analysts studied Imperial psychology. While they celebrated small victories, the real defeat approached from unexpected angles. The trap was always larger than one woman. She'd been the focal point, the distraction, the living calibration tool. Her fights provided the data. Her movements established the timing. Her survival proved Imperial inadequacy. But the real work happened light years away, on ship bridges and command decks, where human strategists used every piece of information she gathered. Humanity orchestrated its war against oppression with precision that shocked the Empire. They didn't use overwhelming force. They used perfect timing. They didn't conquer systems. They liberated them. They didn't destroy infrastructure. They captured it intact. The Empire's own military assets turned against them as rebel forces seized ships, weapons, and bases with surgical precision. The myth became fact across systems. Stories spread faster than light, not just about the woman with the knife, about human resilience, about imperial weakness, about how arrogance blinds even the most powerful. Colonies that had accepted imperial rule for generations began rising up. The Empire found itself fighting not just rebel fleets but its own crumbling authority. On the rooftop, the rain continued to fall. The woman stood among fallen imperial forces, her knife still in hand. Distant explosions lit up the night sky as imperial facilities died across the system. She didn't watch the fireworks. She simply wiped her blade clean and slid it back into her boot. The work was done. The data had been delivered. The counterstroke had begun. Imperial command screens went dark one by one. Not from attack, from desertion. Officers abandoned posts. Soldiers surrendered without firing shots. The myth they'd tried to kill had become reality, and that reality was now swallowing their empire whole. The woman they called Baba Yaga walked away from the rooftop, her part in the drama complete. The lesson had been taught. The test was over. The galaxy would never be the same.